Adolf Hitler.
April 1945. Berlin is collapsing. Bombs shake the ground, and deep beneath the Reich Chancellery, Adolf Hitler has locked himself away in a secret bunker no outsider had ever seen. This underground fortress would become the stage for the final act of the Nazi regime. And when Soviet troops finally forced their way inside, what they uncovered shocked the world. But here's the thing, what they found didn't just confirm Hitler's end. It sparked questions that still haven't been answered even 79 years later. Alright, so let's get into it. Most people think Hitler just threw together some basement hideout when things got bad. But no kidding, this thing was planned for years. And when I tell you what they built, you're gonna be like, that's wild. So yeah, it all started back in 1936. Hitler's architects began digging beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin. They called it the Führerbunker, basically just a starter bunker, you know? But by 1943, with the war going south fast, Hitler was like, we need something way more serious. What they built was absolutely insane. Picture this, 8.5 meters underground, that's like being buried under a 3-story building. The concrete walls, 4 meters thick. That's thicker than most people's entire houses. No kidding. 30 claustrophobic rooms connected by these narrow, maze-like corridors that honestly looked more like a concrete prison than a place where humans were supposed to live. The whole complex had its own everything ventilation system, power generator, even its own phone switchboard connecting directly to military commands across Europe. This wasn't just some bomb shelter, folks. This was designed to be the nerve center of the Third Reich, even as the world above it burned to ashes. But here's the thing that gives me chills every time I think about it. This bunker wasn't just built for protection, it would become Hitler's tomb. Okay, so when did Hitler actually move into this underground nightmare? That's where things get really dark. January 16th, 1945. That's the day Hitler officially made the Führerbunker his permanent home. And believe it or not, by this point, the man who once commanded most of Europe had basically become a prisoner in his own concrete cage. So yeah, let me paint you a picture of what daily life was like down there. The bunker was split into two. Levels upper, level 4 staff. Lower level was Hitler's private domain. Down in those concrete chambers, natural light didn't exist. The air was stale and recycled. The walls constantly shook from Allied bombing above. Hitler's daily routine had become completely detached from reality. The guy would wake up around noon, while his armies were getting destroyed in broad daylight. He'd shuffle around in that gray military coat, hands shaking from what doctors now think was Parkinson's disease, giving orders to armies that didn't even exist anymore. The cast of characters down there was like something out of a horror movie. You had Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister, with his wife Magda and their 6 kids. Yeah, they brought children into this hellhole. Then there was Martin Bormann, Hitler's right-hand man who controlled access to Hitler like some kind of underground gatekeeper. And Eva Braun, Hitler's longtime girlfriend, trying to keep things normal in a world that had gone completely insane. But here's what really gets me every day. The war drew closer. The walls shook with bombs. Inside, Hitler issued orders to armies that no longer even existed. Right, now we're getting into the final act. And honestly, this is where the story gets absolutely wild. April 20th, 1945, Hitler's 56th birthday. This would be the last time the outside world would ever see Adolf Hitler alive. He briefly came up from the bunker to hand out medals to some Hitler Youth kids defending Berlin. These were children, folks. Kids with anti-tank weapons facing down the Soviet army. The photograph from that day is haunting. Hitler looked like a broken man, halo eyes, trembling hands, stooped shoulders. This was supposed to be the guy who promised a 1,000-year Reich, and he looked like he'd aged 20 years in 6 months. But here's where it gets really crazy. While Hitler was hiding underground, his closest allies were making deals behind his back. Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, and supposedly one of Hitler's most loyal guys, was secretly negotiating surrender terms with the Western Allies. When Hitler found out about this betrayal on April 28th, witnesses said he flew into the most violent rage they'd ever seen. That same day, Soviet artillery shells were landing just blocks away. The Red Army was literally on top of them. You could hear Russian voices in the streets above. And what does Hitler do? On April 29th, the one day before the end, he marries Eva Braun in this bizarre midnight ceremony in the bunker S-map room. After the wedding, Hitler dictated his political testament. And you know what? Even facing death, the man took zero responsibility. Instead, he blamed everyone else. It's honestly sickening. Then came April 30th. Around 3:30 p.m., Hitler and Eva said their final goodbyes to the bunker staff. His bodyguard later said Hitler looked relieved, like a weight was finally being lifted. They went into his private study. Staff heard a single gunshot. When they entered, both were dead Eva from cyanide, Hitler from a gunshot to the head, plus cyanide. The staff rushed to burn the bodies in the garden, but what remained would create a mystery that lasted decades. So here's where our story takes a turn that's stranger than fiction. May 2nd, 1945, just 2 days after Hitler's suicide, Soviet forces finally fight their way into the bunker complex. And what they found? Well, that's wild. The first thing that hit them was the smell. Weeks of people living underground with limited ventilation, mixed with smoke from burned documents. The Soviets found rooms filled with ash from burned papers. Hitler's staff had spent their final days destroying evidence. But here's what's really crazy. They found Eva Braun's personal stuff scattered everywhere. Her jewelry, her clothes, even her lipstick. In Hitler's quarters, they found his uniform still hanging in a closet like he'd just stepped out. There were cyanide capsules everywhere, enough to kill dozens of people. And then there was Blondie, Hitler's German shepherd, who he'd tested the cyanide on the day before his own suicide. Yeah, the guy who ordered millions of deaths was so paranoid his suicide pills might not work, he tested them on his own dog first. The Soviets found Blondie's body in the corridor. But here's the kicker, despite finding all this evidence, Stalin ordered his troops to tell the world something completely different. Soviet propaganda claimed Hitler had escaped, maybe hiding in South America or Antarctica. Stalin spread this lie because a living Hitler was more useful for Soviet propaganda than a dead one. For years, no one outside the Soviet Union knew the truth. Okay, so you'd think the Soviets would just tell the world what they found, right? Wrong. What happened next is one of the most bizarre cover-ups in history. In 1945, British historian Hugh Trevor Roper was sent to interview bunker survivors and piece together what really happened. Trevor Roper's investigation was incredibly thorough. He tracked down Hitler's bodyguard, his secretary, his valet, even his dentist's assistants. And that's where things get interesting. Hitler's dentist had fled, but his assistants were captured by the Soviets. Under interrogation, they identified dental remains found in the bunker area as belonging to both Hitler and Eva Braun. The dental work was distinctive. Hitler had bridges and crowns that matched his records perfectly. But the Soviets kept these dental remains secret for decades. The real bombshell came in 2009. Russian authorities finally allowed DNA testing on skull fragments they claimed belonged to Hitler. The results were shocking. The skull belonged to a woman under 40, definitely not Hitler. But wait, there's more. In 2018, French researchers got permission to test different remains, the actual teeth that Hitler's dental assistants had identified back in 1945. Using advanced DNA analysis, they proved definitively that these dental remains belonged to Adolf Hitler. The teeth showed traces of cyanide, confirming witness accounts. So yes, Hitler died in the bunker. But why did the Soviets hide the truth? Whose skull did they really keep in Moscow? Alright, so after all these years of cover-ups and conspiracy theories, here's what we actually know for sure. Hitler absolutely died by suicide in that bunker on April 30th, 1945. The dental evidence is rock solid, it matches his records perfectly and shows cyanide traces. But here's the thing that still bothers historians. Stalin's cover-up wasn't just some mistake. It was calculated. A mysterious, possibly still alive Hitler was way more politically useful than a confirmed dead Hitler. It justified Soviet military presence in Eastern Europe. It kept the West scared and dependent on Soviet cooperation to hunt down escaped Nazis. That's wild when you think about it. It's one of the most successful disinformation campaigns in history. It was built around pretending Hitler might have survived when they had his teeth sitting in a Moscow vault the whole time. Do you know what? That disinformation worked so well that even today, there are people who believe Hitler escaped to Argentina. Hollywood made movies about it. Conspiracy theorists went crazy with it. All because Stalin decided the truth wasn't as useful as a lie. You know, when you really think about what that bunker represented, it's pretty terrifying. This wasn't just Hitler's final hiding place. It was a symbol of how completely disconnected from reality these people had become. Think about it. While millions of Germans were homeless, starving and dying in bombed-out cities, their leaders were living in an underground palace. Still believing they could somehow win the war? The contrast is absolutely staggering. The bunker also showed the Nazi leadership's complete cowardice. These were the same people who sent millions to die in concentration camps, but when faced with their own deaths, they fell apart completely. Hitler blamed everyone else. Goebbels murdered his own children rather than face a world without Nazism. Bormann tried to escape in disguise. And here's something that really gets to me: the staff testimonies revealed just how paranoid and isolated Hitler had become. He didn't trust anyone. He was taking dozens of medications daily. Ranting figure giving impossible orders to armies that existed only in his head. So after 79 years, multiple investigations, DNA tests, and countless conspiracy theories, what did we really find in Hitler's bunker? The truth is both simpler and more disturbing than any myth. We found evidence of a regime so committed to evil that its leaders preferred death to facing justice. We found proof that even in his final hours, Hitler took no responsibility for the suffering he'd caused. We found physical remains of a man who terrorized the world for 12 years, reduced to dental fragments and ash. But maybe most importantly, we found a reminder of why truth matters. Stalin's decision to cover up Hitler's death fed conspiracy theories for decades. That's what happens when propaganda replaces facts. Reality becomes negotiable. The bunker is gone now, buried under a parking lot in Berlin. No monument, no marker, nothing. And honestly, that's probably perfect. Hitler wanted to be remembered for 1,000 years. Instead, the place where he met his end is hidden under concrete, where people park their cars and live normal lives. If this deep dive into one of history's biggest mysteries opened your eyes to how important it is to separate fact from fiction, hit that like button and share this video. What surprised you most about the real story? Drop a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe for more historical investigations that cut through the myths to find the truth. Because understanding what really happened isn't just about the past, it is about recognizing the warning signs if something like this ever threatens our world again. Thanks for watching. The truth might be more complex than conspiracy theories, but it's always more important. Until next time, remember, history's most crucial lessons are often buried in the places we're afraid to look.